Hey, welcome back to another video. We're still talking about angels and demons and people's experiences, what they've seen. So let's get into this. First story. I saw three pillars of light cross the void. One big one in the back with two smaller ones in front. They were rays of light casting out in the veil of the void, like a plasma ball we used to play with as kids. I looked down upon the pillars of light to see a dark artificial force. Three tentacle-like objects were pulsing out, reaching towards the pillars of light. When I saw a glimpse of what lays beyond the veil of our reality. The three pillars were the Trinity, not in physical form, but spiritual, the forces beyond our grasp of consciousness. The biggest pillar of light was reaching out to us. Each pulse was a new instance of life or death. I was shown this after God clinched into my soul, and I cried out in prayer. I cried out for forgiveness. The response was truly repent or be eventually destroyed. Each word comes from within, and each word clenching harder, tighter in my chest, heartbeat racing. It was as real as day, and that day was October 28th. It's a pretty good story there. I'm fairly certain, this is the next story, I'm fairly certain I met and talked to an angel last year. I was at a young adults worship gathering. We all, about 40 of us people, got together in a parking garage late at night to sing and worship songs together. There was a young man that no one recognized, looking maybe around 20 to 22 years old. He wore a plain white t-shirt, black jeans, and black plastic rimmed glasses. When we began to pray as a group, he prayed with such conviction that I had goosebumps. The craziest part, after the group finished singing and we began to disperse, the young man in the white t-shirt stopped me. He said hello, laid a hand on my shoulder, and told me that God knew about my brokenness and where I was not shown love but only pain. This guy, whom I had never laid eyes on, proceeded to tell me about how God knew that I had been abused and that he had plans to restore me and show me real love. He prayed over me, and I felt this strange sense of peace right away. I can't explain it. He summoned up all the past years of my life with all that I told him, and when all that I told him was my name. I attended these meetings weekly for several months without ever seeing that young man again. That's an interesting one. I like that one. Next. Once I was at church praying in the back when the congregation was singing. The worship pastor was grimacing, and he couldn't stand up all the way straight. Something was wrong with his upper back. As I was praying, I suddenly saw this weird thing on his back. It was gray with a beak-like head. It just had two talon-like appendages with which it gripped him over and under each shoulder. I was seeing two things at once. Looking at him with my eyes, I saw nothing there, but at the same time, I saw this creature on his back, as if it were an overlay. I started praying, and then started declaring aloud quietly that the creature must go. All of a sudden, the creature turned and looked directly at me with this murderous look, just animalistic, predatory eyes. Then his face became filled with consternation, and he disappeared as if he had been tucked away into another dimension. He looked vaguely like a bird, and reminds me of the passage of Revelation 18:2, mentioning foul spirits with every unclean and hateful bird. After he left, the worship leader said he suddenly felt better and that God had answered his prayers to feel good enough to play the whole set. And he was able to loosen up and move around a bit better and stand up a little straighter, although still not quite normally. Another time, I went to a convention with some B-list church speakers. Two of them were sitting on chairs in the platform. They were riffing off each other about spiritual things to get us pumped for the class session. And suddenly I saw this third figure in between them, but over their heads and a bit behind them. But it was solid, featureless blue, like the color you see after you look directly at a powerful light source and then look away. But this figure didn't move around when I looked away, as a light impression would do, and the lightning overhead spots turned away from me onto the stage so that I couldn't see them to get an impression anyway. And I couldn't see his lower extremities because he was flying, but in place without moving, and I saw no wings. He had a hand reached out over each of them as if he were trying to rest his hand on each of their backs and listening in. And I knew it was a presence, a person. And I couldn't stare, and I couldn't bring myself to look at him after that glance. I could only tell that was what I guess were his arms. And I strangely wasn't afraid. I was like, oh, an angel, cool. Well, I guess they are all around us after all. As if this happened to me every day of the week, and we were thoroughly expected, and I was a thorough expert in such things. I was completely calm and felt good until I felt the session about an hour later, and the minute I stepped outside, I suddenly completely lost my nerve. Maybe this was about St. Peter, maybe this was what St. Peter felt on the Mount of Transfiguration, and I suddenly felt as it was absolutely necessary to serve everyone in there however I could. I was utterly caught up in a frantic feeling of about that for half an hour. It didn't go away until, let's just say, I had a moment where suddenly I knew I was stumbled on something bigger that I could handle. And as much as I wanted to run back in and gaze on the spectacle and somehow obtain something spiritual from it, I knew that I was ordered to drive back home and not return to the convention, which I did, but I was utterly shattered, and I wept like I had missed the opportunity of a lifetime. I have stuff like this that happens to me fairly regularly since then, but on a more toned-down level that I was more comfortable with. Dreams and visions of the mind's eye rather than visible. Twice in the way I saw someone and felt that it was Jesus. There were many special times. Animated phenomena visible over photographs when I look at them. Flashes of green or radiant golden light where people have been healed or touched in the spirit, but they don't reveal a form or a person. I don't see them every time. I don't see them whenever I want to see them. I don't crave them most of the time because it's so otherworldly and powerful that the intimidation is massive to endure. Only when I feel really alone and miserable, but that's no guarantee they will show. It is a rare thing. That's pretty fascinating. Next story. I pray frequently, and I guess that's something. There is also this weird connection that I've had with God for a long time. Certainly mentally alliterated into my own words, which makes me wonder about their validity. But I certainly had this feeling of being communicated with by some otherworldliness at a few key moments in my life. There was also Christ gyrating in front of me in a gold Speedo on an acid trip. I promise I'm not trolling when I say that this happened at 17 in the room of a stripper friend I was doing this with. It wasn't sexual in nature, but it told me, hey, God isn't malign, and frankly, Christ isn't really judgmental of any of your strangeness. That's a story. We're just going to leave that one there. The next one, not me, but my dad. He was upset for a while because of something he saw on the news about a little girl, around 8 years old, who accidentally killed her friend while playing a little rough. He didn't want her to go to prison over an accident that could have happened to anyone. While I work, an African-American woman stepped in front of his truck. When he spoke to her to find out why she would do that, she told him that she knew what was bothering him and to pray for the little girl, but to put it in God's hands. She then walked behind his truck and seemingly disappeared. He didn't see her on the other side, and there were no doors to speak of where he was, but he was sure that it was an angel. I don't know for sure, but I want to believe. Next one. When I was 18, I met Jesus face to face. I was at a Christian conference, and this was at the peak of my Christian faith. That is to say, I was on fire for Christ and had been a Christian for just under a year. I remember worshiping at the conference and wanting to see God so bad. The first day of the worship experience, I felt like God was saying that I am close and to keep pushing in. This very well could have been my own interpretations. Nevertheless, the next day when we were worshiping, I had my hands at waist-length palms up, just soaking in the presence of Christ when, wow, he was there standing before me, holding my palms, sort of, and without moving his mouth, was speaking in my mind, just filling me with love, glory, power at the same time. I remember speaking back to him, paraphrase, "Oh my God, Jesus, it's really you. You were so amazing. Why don't you visit blank and blank, who were also there with me?" Then I realized, no, I wanted to be with this Jesus forever and would do anything for him and to have him never leave my presence. So I said, this is paraphrased, "Jesus, I don't care if we never have to leave this position. I will stand like this for the rest of my life if it means you will always be here with me like this." Then in the most Jesus-like way, he said, blank, the name, and something else. Don't you know I will always be with you at your right side, no matter where you go. And then it was over just like that. I was bewildered that my friends didn't experience anything. I wrote it down in my journal. It's very precious memory to me and will always be. Hope this helps in some way. So the next story. Not my story, my grandfather's. To truly understand the situation, you need to know who Chester is. Chester was born the same time around my mom, early 60s. Chester didn't get to see the 70s, 80s, or 90s. Chester died from getting hit by a car after getting off his school bus. I forgot what age he was. All I know is that he was a small boy, maybe 10 or 7 years old. Around 40 years later, my grandfather was dying. He had Alzheimer's, which contributed to his death. Shortly before he died, he was in the hospital on IVs and everything. My mom was sitting at the corner of the table. Suddenly, my grandfather sat up straight in the bed, and he said, "I can't go now. I'm not ready." My mom was confused, looking around to see who he was talking to. Finally, after much searching, she said, "Who are you talking to, Dad?" And he said, "The little boy and the man behind him." After many questions from my mother, he identified the little boy as Chester. "See you in Zion, Grandpa." There's probably quite a few stories like that. It kind of goes with here, but it kind of could also be a paranormal situation there. But the next story. I have seen a demon before. I was walking home from a friend's house. It was late and I had a couple of beers, but nothing crazy. I was far more sober than I was inebriated. I was on the street my house was on and turned down a side street. No idea why I did this actually. It literally took me directly away from my house. I got about 50 meters down the street and was standing under a tree. I thought I heard something behind me, so I looked back towards my house. Nothing was there. When I turned back, I saw it. It was mostly opaque. I could see through it, but not entirely. It was about 6 or 7 feet tall, black with almost golden glow to its skin, or aura, muscled, very muscled. I didn't notice any wings, but it had horns and a scowl like you don't believe. It looked kind of like this. There's a link. But not exactly. Anyways, when I heard it growl, a deep, bassy growl, like when you hear a jet engine throttle up a few hundred feet away. I turned away and started walking back toward my house. I got about 5 or 10 feet away, and I must have pissed it off or something. It felt very real, very physical pain in my left leg, like I had been hit by something, slashed, or just grabbed very forcibly. I can't say for sure. I shrugged it off as best I could and kept on walking as fast as I could get home. Now that I think about it, a few weeks leading up to the event, in the very vicinity of a few blocks, I remember seeing something several times that was black with a weird golden glow to it. Maybe it was waiting, or I felt like I was invading its turf. No idea. I have more stories if anyone is interested. The one thing I can say for sure is that if you start believing, they start believing too. Be careful. It's very hard to close that door when it's open. That's some very good information there because, yeah, that's something I totally believe in. You got to be careful what you welcome in and what you believe in because okay, next story. Me and my friend Owen, who feels the spirits of things, was sitting in a baseball diamond. We turned around for about a minute, then turned back around, and then on the other side of the diamond, 100 feet away, there were 2 boys. Now, mind you, the diamond is in the field, so we would have seen them coming. We didn't move, and they were looking at the other way. Now Owen was creeped out because he could feel the spirits of everything else, even the trees outside the diamond. The boys were empty, so to say. We kind of got freaked the fuck out, so we left. Once we were about 200 feet from the diamond, we looked back and they were gone. Owen's vision started to tunnel and black out, and my heart beat irregularly. For weeks after that, we were plagued by these things that stalked us from the corner of our vision. They were stark white, stood about 5 to 8 feet tall, very, very skinny, probably like 4 inches, and were basically columns with no features, save for legs that were simple sticks, straight below the body. They moved out of sync. When they walked, their legs would only lift halfway through a step, might lift up before they hit the ground. What were they? Demons? Monstrosities? That's kind of freaky. That's a freaky one. I don't know what to think about that one. Hi, welcome back to another video. We're still talking about angels and demons and Jesus and other creatures and other, religious symbols, I guess, wherever the stories takes us. And so let's get into this. Ready? I saw a couple of angels. They were wearing gowns like this, but the sleeves were shorter, more by the elbow. The gowns were light blue, light pink, and white. They were beautiful, looked human. The only two that stand out mostly to me was a woman who had curly, long blonde hair. She had the pink gown, and a guy with dark hair who had a blue gown. They were smiling. They had beautiful, big white wings. Okay. Once when I was 10 years old, during the Sunday liturgy of the Orthodox Church here in Greece, I was a very lively child, so I couldn't sit down like everyone else. And I was mostly just dancing and looking left, up, and down and all this. And then all of a sudden, I saw an all-white figure in the fold that everyone had an image of the angels, hovering high as sunlight penetrated the windows in the church's dome for quite some time, certainly more than a minute. I was the first to perceive it, and after firstly I made sure of what my childish eyes were seeing, I showed it to my grandmother, who saw it too, and then all the ladies who were next to her and heard me tell her. I have never had such an experience since then, but my grandmother told me they had seen it before in this particular temple. Sounds like it's prevalent there. That's pretty cool. Next story. So I know this is a very old post, but wanted to add my 2 cents. Back when I was 18 or 20 years old, I was living in Delray Beach, Florida. I was walking downtown and was people watching. Well, I saw a man with a bloody, basically skeletal face. There was no way this man could have been a real man. It had to have been a demon. It walked past me and nothing happened. Another time, I was staying at a super shitty hotel with a stranger I met to have a place to stay. Well, she passed out super deep, so I stretched out by this place and heard noises outside the room. I wanted to go investigate, but wanted to keep an eye on the room too. I left my phone on the table with the voice recorder on and left my room, walked around the hotel, came back and listened to the recording on the phone. There was crazy demon sounds that I know couldn't be artificial or someone making the sound. It was truly a demon. Super crazy and scary. Anyway, those are my 2 experiences. The next one. When I was young, about 15 years old, I wasn't able to sleep as I was stressed about school the next day. It was like 2 a.m. and I was sleeping at my parents' bedroom. Take note that I was quite young and didn't know God back then. I was not a true believer at the time also. So in the midst of feeling stressed about not being able to sleep, I prayed to God, asking him to protect me and let me have a good night's sleep. That time, I remember I woke up to a bright light and then I looked at my front door. I realized that it was a tall, bright man in my parents' bedroom. Take note that he had feet, but he was floating and he did not have any wings. It was like a bright silhouette of a man, and I remember lifting myself out of the bed, being really scared, like super scared. I was not scared because he was scary, but because the atmosphere felt powerful. Then a supernatural force pushed me down and I was able to sleep peacefully. The next time I told my parents about it, they did not believe in me. But I knew that it was the light, that the light was an angel. True story. I've had many dreams where I've encountered demons. One of the dreams I've had is to remember I was in this house I've never been in before in real life, and I was standing in front of of what I guess was another room of the house. Well, that opening was pitch black, and I saw a figure standing there, and I remember its eyes flashed on and off with the color red, sort of like a blinking light. It was scary, but you know what, I also had a dream where a demon tried to attack me, and once I started rebuking it in Jesus' name, the demon started to shrink and get weaker. There is power in the name of Jesus. John 3:16. Next one. I was 10 years old. I was laying in bed watching Star Wars Clone Wars. It was a new episode. I remember exactly what I was doing. I looked at the doorway of my bedroom and saw a figure standing there, and I couldn't make out a face or anything, but it was just so bright, almost like it was glowing and wearing a robe or something. I really didn't understand it much as a child as I do now, but I definitely saw an angel. Cool. When I was about 5, my dad was driving me home. On the corner of a busy intersection, we both saw a man in a robe with a beard, and he looked like he walked straight out of the Old Testament. He was holding a sign that said, "Compose songs for the Lord." The moment we entered the intersection, he turned and looked us right in the eye with a very stern look and followed the car. We both got chills. I don't know what I saw, but 20 years later, I'm almost certain it was something I was meant to see. Well, did you start composing songs for the Lord? I mean, if it was a command, you should do it. Okay, so next story. Demon took on human form as my sister twice and once as my mom. First time I was just a little girl when I encountered a demon experience. I don't know how to feel or what to say, but I knew what I saw. Years later, down the road, age 11, a demon took the form of my mom to trick me into going into our haunted den room, and I waited in the living room for 3 hours for my mom to come back out of the den so I could talk to her. So I just went back in there and turned the light and saw my sister, Tiffany. Long story short, the next day I found out that she wasn't even home. Am I going to hell? Can someone please help me ASAP? I need answers. Please message me. Then someone replies with, "No, you're not going to hell. Just pray to Jesus Christ. Tell him that you love him and believe him." And then basically that sort of thing. Hello, I would like to share my story too, in case there is someone who has experienced something similar. 3 or 4 years ago, I had absolutely nothing to do with religion or spirituality. So one summer night, I was sitting in the balcony of my house alone, when I suddenly saw a figure like a man, but white and very bright. going up the road to my house. I froze, and I looked at it intently to understand what exactly I was seeing. I thought he was human, but he was so bright that I could not understand his features. The scariest thing of all was that while he was walking, he suddenly stopped, as if he realized that I saw it, and turned back to leave walking. Just before he turned and I lost sight of it, it disappeared and appeared on the other side of the field under a tree. I stared at it until I was completely disappeared for a few seconds. I'm absolutely sure it was not human for two reasons. Firstly, it was so bright that I could not see anything on it except its human shape, and secondly, my dog that was sleeping under the balcony would have seen it the first second it appeared in front of her. Please, if you have any similar experiences or an explanation, let me know, because after so many years, I am not able to explain it. Thank you. Well, hopefully, someone's replied to that and you're able to find some clarity or whatever you need on that. But anyway, thank you all for listening. And please like, share, subscribe, do all those things. If you liked it. If not, then it's okay too. But thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.